Joe Theismann. Joe Theismann was a two-time Pro Bowler and had just led Washington to a Super Bowl championship 2 years earlier. On November 18, 1985, during a Monday Night Football game against the New York Giants, Theismann dropped back for what seemed like another routine pass play. He was 36 years old, still playing at an elite level, and showed no signs of slowing down. Then Lawrence Taylor came crashing in. The legendary linebacker, known for his ferocious playing style, dove for the sack with his full 237-pound frame. As Taylor made contact, his entire weight came down directly on Theismann's right lower leg while it was planted in the turf. The tibia and fibula snapped instantly, a comminuted compound fracture so severe that the bones exploded through the skin. The sound was audible across the field. Taylor, one of the most ruthless competitors in NFL history, immediately signaled for medical help, later saying he knew instantly that Theismann's career was over. The injury was so graphic that ABC chose not to replay it during the broadcast. The aftermath was devastating. Despite multiple surgeries and a rigorous rehabilitation process, Theismann's right leg healed slightly shorter than his left. This seemingly minor difference destroyed the precise footwork and mobility that had made him a Pro Bowl quarterback. He attempted a comeback, but his body couldn't deliver the same mechanics. At 36, with a championship ring and a brilliant career behind him, Theismann was forced into retirement. He transitioned into broadcasting, where he remains today, but that single hit on a cold November night ended what could have been several more productive years under center. Darryl Stingley was a promising wide receiver for the New England Patriots, coming off a season where he'd caught 39 passes for over 600 yards. In a preseason game on August 12, 1978, the Patriots faced the Oakland Raiders, a matchup that would change Stingley's life forever. He was just 26 years old, entering his 6th NFL season with his best years theoretically ahead of him. Stingley ran a crossing route over the middle, one of the most dangerous areas of the field. As the pass arrived, Oakland safety Jack Tatum, nicknamed the Assassin for his brutal hitting style, launched himself at Stingley. The shoulder-to-helmet collision struck Stingley as he was in a defenseless position, unable to brace for impact. The force compressed his spinal cord and shattered his 4th and 5th cervical vertebrae. Stingley collapsed to the turf and never moved. The hit, while legal under 1978 rules, was so violent that players from both teams immediately knew something catastrophic had occurred. Tatum walked away without checking on Stingley, a decision that haunted both men for the rest of their lives. The damage was irreversible. Stingley was paralyzed from the chest down, a quadriplegic at 26 years old. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair, enduring countless surgeries and infections. The injury became the catalyst for the NFL's defenseless receiver rules that protect players today. Stingley never played another down, never walked again, and lived with the consequences until his death in 2007 at age 55. One preseason hit a meaningless game destroyed not just his career, but his entire future. Before we continue with more of these devastating injuries, if you're finding this video informative, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. These stories need to be told, and your support helps us continue bringing you in-depth football content like this. Now, let's continue. Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson wasn't just an NFL player, he was a cultural phenomenon. The only athlete to be named an all-star in both baseball and football, Jackson had already achieved legendary status by 1991. Playing for the Oakland Raiders, he'd rushed for over 2,700 yards in just 4 seasons, while simultaneously playing outfield for the Kansas City Royals. At 28 years old, he was in his absolute prime, a genetic marvel that defied conventional athletic limitations. During a playoff game against the Cincinnati Bengals on January 13, 1991, Jackson took a handoff and was tackled by linebacker Kevin Walker. It looked completely routine, the kind of tackle that happens dozens of times every game. But as Jackson went down, his hip was violently pulled from its socket. He felt it immediately, telling trainers, "My hip popped out." The dislocation was reduced on the field, and initially, it seemed like Jackson might recover. But the trauma had caused something far worse, avascular necrosis, a condition where blood flow to the bone is completely cut off. Without blood supply, the bone tissue in Jackson's hip began to die. The diagnosis was a death sentence for his football career. Despite attempts at rehabilitation, the deteriorating bone forced Jackson to undergo a total hip replacement, a procedure that ended any possibility of returning to the violent collisions of professional football. He attempted a baseball comeback with an artificial hip, incredibly hitting a home run in his first at-bat, but his days as a two-sport superstar were finished. One routine tackle destroyed what many consider the greatest pure athletic career in American sports history. Jackson was 28 years old. He should have had 5 or 6 more elite seasons ahead of him, but instead, his NFL career ended with 2,782 rushing yards across just 38 games, a tantalizing glimpse of what could have been. Kevin Everett. Kevin Everett was a young tight end trying to establish himself with the Buffalo Bills. On September 9, 2007, during the season opener against the Denver Broncos, Everett was running downfield on a kickoff return special teams duty that every young player is expected to handle. He was 25 years old, athletic, and had his entire career ahead of him. Everett lowered his head to make a tackle on the return man. The collision created what doctors call a scissoring effect in his spine. His third and fourth cervical vertebrae compressed his spinal cord like a vice. Everett collapsed instantly, completely paralyzed from the neck down. As he lay motionless on the field, medical personnel knew this was life-threatening. His body temperature began dropping, and he was rushed to Millard Fillmore Gates Circle Hospital in Buffalo. The diagnosis was catastrophic, a fracture dislocation of the cervical spine with severe spinal cord injury. Doctors gave him a less than 10% chance of ever walking again. What happened next was medical history. Dr. Andrew Cappuccino and his team immediately began cold saline induction therapeutic hypothermia, pumping ice-cold saline directly into Everett's veins to reduce the swelling in his spinal cord. This cutting-edge treatment, rarely used in 2007, quite literally saved his functional life. Against all odds, Everett began moving his arms within days, his legs within weeks. 5 months later, he walked onto the Oprah Winfrey Show without assistance. It was miraculous, but it wasn't a cure. The nerve damage was permanent, and while Everett heroically regained basic motor function, he was never medically cleared to play contact sports again. His NFL career consisted of just 12 games. One special teams tackle at 25 years old, and it was over. Sterling Sharpe. Sterling Sharpe was absolutely dominant in 1994, one of the most unstoppable receivers in football. Playing for the Green Bay Packers, he just set an NFL record with 112 receptions in a season and was a 5-time Pro Bowler at just 29 years old. Brett Favre's favorite target, Sharpe was in the conversation for best receiver in the game, and his prime should have extended well into his 30s. During a December game against the Atlanta Falcons, Sharpe suffered what players call a stinger, a burning sensation in the neck and shoulder that's relatively common in football. He continued playing through the discomfort, but something felt wrong. After the game, team doctors ordered extensive testing. The results were shocking. Sharpe had a pre-existing neck abnormality that no one had detected, combined with chronic looseness in his top 2 cervical vertebrae. The stinger wasn't just a minor injury, it was a warning sign of catastrophic structural instability. Specialists delivered the devastating news. A single heavy hit could result in permanent paralysis or death. There was no surgery that could fix it, no rehabilitation program that could strengthen it. Sharpe's neck simply couldn't withstand NFL-level contact anymore. At 29, having just posted 112 catches for 1,119 yards and 18 touchdowns, Sterling Sharpe was forced to retire immediately. No farewell tour, no final season, just an abrupt end to one of the most promising careers in NFL history. His younger brother Shannon would go on to the Hall of Fame, but Sterling's career ended with him still at his absolute peak, a victim of an anatomical time bomb that was waiting to explode. Johnny Knox? Johnny Knox was an exciting young receiver for the Chicago Bears, known for his speed and acrobatic catches. On December 18, 2011, during a game against the Seattle Seahawks, Knox hauled in a pass but immediately fumbled. As the ball bounced free, Knox did what every coach teaches. He dove desperately to recover his own fumble. Seahawks defensive end Anthony Hargrove came charging in to secure the ball. He didn't see Knox diving at the same angle. The collision was horrific. Hargrove's momentum drove directly into Knox's lower back, while Knox's body was extended in the dive. The impact bent Knox's body completely backward in an unnatural, folding motion that shouldn't be physically possible. His spine flexed in a way the human body is not designed to bend. Players on both teams turned away. Knox's 6th thoracic vertebra fractured, and doctors later revealed he was centimeters away from permanent paralysis. The recovery was agonizing. Knox underwent extensive surgery and spent months relearning basic movements. Eventually, miraculously, he regained the ability to walk and live a relatively normal life. But the core strength was gone. The explosive acceleration that made him an NFL receiver had vanished, and the mental trauma of nearly being paralyzed haunted every movement. Knox attempted a comeback in 2013, but his body couldn't produce the same athletic output. At just 25 years old, with what should have been a decade of football ahead of him, Johnny Knox was finished. The Bears released him, and he never played another professional snap. Mike Utley was a powerful offensive guard for the Detroit Lions. part of the offensive line protecting quarterback Rodney Peete. On November 17, 1991, during a game against the Los Angeles Rams, Utley was engaged in pass protection, the most fundamental task for an offensive lineman. At 27 years old, he was entering his prime, a 3-year starter building toward a long career. During the play, Utley was pulled down by a Rams defender and landed headfirst on the artificial turf at the Pontiac Silverdome. The angle of impact was catastrophic. His 5th, 6th, and 7th cervical vertebrae shattered on contact. Utley crumpled to the ground, unable to move anything below his neck. As medical staff immobilized him and prepared to cart him off the field, Utley, showing the heart of a warrior, gave the crowd a defiant thumbs-up signal. That gesture became iconic, a symbol of hope and resilience that transcended sports. But the thumbs-up couldn't change the medical reality. Mike Utley was a quadriplegic. He never played another down, never walked again, never regained use of his legs. That single landing, one split second of bad fortune during a routine play, destroyed everything. However, Utley channeled his tragedy into purpose, founding the Mike Utley Foundation to fund spinal cord injury research. His thumbs up became the foundation's logo, and for over 30 years, he's raised millions for research and rehabilitation. His career was destroyed by one hit, but his impact on the lives of spinal injury survivors has been immeasurable. Steve Young was a Hall of Fame quarterback in his 15th NFL season, still performing at a high level for the San Francisco 49ers. On September 27, 1999, during a Monday Night Football game against the Arizona Cardinals, Young dropped back to pass in what would be the final play of his legendary career. He was 38 years old but still mobile, still dangerous, still one of the best in the game. Cardinals cornerback Aeneas Williams came on a blindside blitz that Young never saw. Williams hit Young cleanly, but as Young fell, his head struck the knee of his own offensive lineman. Young collapsed, clearly concussed, lying motionless for several terrifying seconds. This was Young's 4th diagnosed concussion in just 3 years, and the cumulative effect was becoming medically dangerous. The blows were adding up, the brain trauma was accumulating, and doctors were increasingly concerned about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, and permanent neurological damage. Young attempted to return that same season, but the writing was on the wall. The risk of another concussion, potentially catastrophic, wasn't worth it. On June 12, 2000, Young officially announced his retirement, walking away from a career that included a Super Bowl championship, 2 MVP awards, and a guaranteed Hall of Fame legacy. He was still effective, still capable, but one more hit to a brain that had already absorbed too much trauma could have resulted in permanent disability or worse. Steve Young's career didn't end because he couldn't play anymore. It ended because playing might have killed him. Reggie Brown was a solid linebacker for the Detroit Lions, playing in the final regular season game of 1997 against the New York Jets. On December 21st, at Giant Stadium, Brown assisted on a routine tackle during the game. Nothing about the play seemed unusual, just another tackle in a long season. But as the pile cleared, Reggie Brown didn't get up. Brown had suffered a severe spinal cord contusion, bruising and trauma to the spinal cord itself. He lay completely motionless on the frozen turf for 17 agonizing minutes, while team doctors worked frantically. Then his breathing stopped. His heart was still beating, but his lungs had ceased functioning, a terrifying sign that the spinal injury had compromised his brain's ability to control basic autonomic functions. Team physicians immediately began CPR, manually breathing for Brown, while an ambulance rushed onto the field. They saved his life on that field. Emergency surgery stabilized Brown's spine, and miraculously, he eventually regained the use of his limbs and learned to walk again. But the damage to his spinal column was too extensive to ever absorb NFL-level contact again. At 27 years old, Reggie Brown's career was over. The play itself was forgettable, routine, nothing that would have made highlights. But it destroyed his career and nearly took his life. A stark reminder that in football, catastrophic injury can happen on literally any play. Wendell Davis was a talented wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, and on October 10, 1993, he was playing at Philadelphia's Veterans Stadium, a venue infamous for its rock-hard AstroTurf playing surface. Davis was running a route, preparing to make a cut and jump for the ball. What happened next was one of the most bizarre and horrifying injuries in NFL history, and it happened without any contact whatsoever. As Davis planted both feet to jump, his cleats caught in the artificial turf. The surface didn't give. His momentum continued upward, but his feet stayed locked in place. The force was so extreme that the patellar tendons in both knees, the tendons connecting the kneecap to the shin bone, severed simultaneously. Both kneecaps were ripped upward into his thighs. Davis collapsed, screaming, his legs grotesquely deformed, in agony that witnesses described as unlike anything they'd ever heard on a football field. The dual injury was catastrophic beyond repair. Surgeons attempted to reattach the tendons, but the structural damage to both legs was too severe. The kneecaps couldn't be properly stabilized, the muscles had been shredded, and the biomechanics necessary for explosive athletic movement were permanently destroyed. Wendell Davis never played another NFL game. No defender hit him, no collision occurred, the playing surface itself destroyed his career in a single, terrible moment. Dennis Byrd was a defensive lineman for the New York Jets, a pass rusher whose career was built on speed and power. On November 29, 1992, during a game against the Kansas City Chiefs, Byrd and his teammate Scott Mercereau were both rushing the quarterback from opposite sides. In the chaos of the collapsing pocket, neither saw the other coming. They collided head-on at full speed, Byrd's helmet striking Mercereau's chest with devastating force. Byrd's fifth cervical vertebra shattered instantly. He collapsed to the turf, completely paralyzed, unable to move his arms or legs. As he was carted off, the diagnosis was grim: C5 fracture with complete spinal cord trauma. Doctors told Byrd he would likely never walk again, that his career was obviously over, and that he should prepare for life as a quadriplegic. But Dennis Byrd refused to accept that future. Through grueling, agonizing physical therapy sessions that lasted hours every single day, Byrd made miraculous progress. Just 4 months after the injury, he walked into a press conference on his own 2 feet, defying medical expectations. It was inspirational, heroic, a story of human willpower triumphing over catastrophic injury. But while Byrd regained his ability to walk, his days as a 275-pound defensive lineman were permanently finished. His NFL career ended at 26 years old in a freak collision with his own teammate, Jermichael Finley. Jermichael Finley was one of the most athletic tight ends in football, a matchup nightmare for defenses playing for the Green Bay Packers. On October 20th, 2013, during a game against the Cleveland Browns, Finley caught a pass and was immediately hit helmet-to-helmet by Browns safety Tashawn Gibson. The hit drove Finley's head backward violently, and he collapsed in a heap. Finley had suffered a bruised spinal cord, a spinal contusion that caused immediate loss of feeling in his extremities. He was rushed to a Milwaukee hospital and spent time in the intensive care unit as doctors monitored for permanent paralysis. The injury was so severe that Finley later described feeling nothing below his neck, a terrifying sensation that lasted for hours. Eventually, sensation began returning, and Finley underwent successful spinal fusion surgery, a procedure where vertebrae are permanently joined together to provide stability. Finley attempted a comeback, working tirelessly to prove he could still play. But no NFL team would touch him. The medical risk was too great, the liability too extreme. Insurance companies refused to cover him, teams wouldn't sign him, and despite being just 27 years old and one of the most talented tight ends in football, Jermichael Finley never played another snap. One helmet-to-helmet hit, one moment of impact, and a promising career was finished. Which of these injuries do you think was the most devastating? And what do you think the NFL should do to better protect players from career-ending hits? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this video opened your eyes to just how dangerous this game can be, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into football history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.